Hey there, Internet friends. Trevor Starkey here with another episode of my 2017 Game of the Year coverage. If you're just joining me, the last couple days I've gone over basically a look back at my 2016 lists, both my worst of and my best of lists for last year's stuff before kind of diving into the 2017 stuff, which I'm going to do today with my favorite gaming moments, my best gaming moments of 2017. Now, this is going to be a mixture of moments that kind of hit the industry, as well as just personal moments, as well as great moments in games this year. That said, there are potential spoilers for the following games: What Remains of Edith Finch, Super Mario Odyssey, Wolfenstein 2 The New Colossus, and Destiny 2. Number 10, Death Squared with Friends. I think I first remember seeing Death Squared at PAX East 2016. As I recall, Brittany Brombacher and a couple other industry people that I kind of follow tweeted about the game, and so I checked it out on the show floor, and then I would keep an eye out for it at subsequent shows, and I wrote about it enough that they reached out and offered me a review code for the game when it was coming out this year. And so I just happened to bring my PlayStation 4 with me when I visited my friends Joey Noel, Lauren Wilson, and Ben Bellevue because we were going to Universal Studios to hang out at Harry Potter World. And so the day before our big Hogsmeade adventure, we just sat and hung out over pizza and drinks, and then we played some Death Squared before it came out. We played the 4-player multiplayer mode. If I had found out, or if I'd heard back from the Death Squared PR team beforehand, we totally would have streamed it, but they had some stuff in their embargo, and I was like, I don't know if I can stream this or not. They ended up coming back and saying, oh yeah, you totally can, but by then I was already back in Phoenix. But it was just a wonderful local multiplayer experience, which I just don't get all that much in gaming. And the whole weekend in which I drove from Phoenix to Los Angeles to hang out with internet friends was just a testament to the bonds that I've made in the last few years in this industry, and in specifically in the Kind of Funny community. And our drunken Death Squared antics filled with hundreds and hundreds of deaths are certainly one of my favorite moments of the year. Number 9, from Horizon Zero Dawn, taking down a Thunderjaw, a Stormbird, a Rockbreaker. For me, Horizon Zero Dawn is a fantastic game, and one of my favorite elements of the game is its combat. Specifically, I think it does a very good job with its learning curve. The game starts you off by putting you against mostly docile machine creatures, and it teaches you its mechanics and introduces you to its wide array of weapon types. But eventually you start easily taking out these things left and right, and so you stumble upon your first Thunderjaw, which is the fierce, relentless T-Rex type creature, and it will destroy you if you are not careful. When I discovered that I could use my arrows and rip the disc launchers off of the Thunderjaw's back and then use them to severely put some damage into the guy, it was just an incredible moment for me, and I totally did that whole fist pump thing when I took one out for the first time. And eventually, I became a pro at taking those things out, knocking them out left and right. And so Horizon continued to give me these intense combat puzzles that I got to enjoy in the forms of taking out the massive Stormbird and, the lightning that it rains from above, as well as the Rockbreaker, which would just annoyingly, frustratingly tunnel beneath me and then just burst up and beat the crap out of me like a techno-futuristic version of Tremors. And conquering these beasts throughout the game was just super badass-like. Taking them out with just your bow and arrow, just endlessly wonderful badass moments in Horizon Zero Dawn. Number 8, Bethesda LAN. For many, I think the best part of attending or watching E3 is the press conferences and all the announcements and the exciting news that you get. I certainly have had fun predicting and reporting on, the major showcases in the past few years, but when I flew out this year, I didn't think I'd actually attend any. The E3 tickets don't guarantee you a spot in any press conference, and I certainly don't have the connections or the tie-ins to get into any of the conferences. But when my roommate for the first part of that weekend, Dustin Furman of Handsome Phantom, pointed out that Bethesda was opening up tickets to fans, we hung out in a super early line for a few hours just hanging out on our Switches and picked up wristbands to go to Bethesda LAN. And I don't think either of us knew that that would be getting us access into, like, the makeshift park that Bethesda's PR team had built in downtown LA. We walked into this theme park with its own theme music and a Ferris wheel and kind of little segmented lands a la Disneyland. So you had a Prey land, and you had a Elder Scrolls land, and a Doom land, and it was just a ton of fun. There was free food, free alcohol for everything. You could get, like, exclusive pins. I only picked up 2, but Dustin went crazy trying to go track all of the I think 8 different pins down that they had for each of the different franchises. And then to cap it all off, we got to enjoy the, quick bombardment of announcements for everything that Bethesda was doing in 2017, including them formally announcing Wolfenstein 2 and The Evil Within 2. And so Bethesda LAN was amazing, and the conference was icing on the cake. Number 7, back to a moment from a game from What Remains of Edith Finch. I have the story of Lois Finch here. What Remains of Edith Finch is an interesting one for me because it didn't grab me in the way that it grabbed so many people that I follow online. The story, I thought it had a lot of great moments, but the story as a whole, I feel like left me wanting. And that said, like, the moments in Edith Finch, you could make a top 10 list of the best moments of the year from that game alone. I choose not to, and when I was thinking about, what kind of moment I wanted to pull from that game to showcase what stood out with me, it was actually a moment that I had completely forgotten about until re-discussing it with a friend who just kind of beat it recently. We sat down, we were talking about Lewis's story, and I was like, yeah, that's the one I'm going to go with. Originally, I was thinking maybe Molly's, which is where you kind of go through the, you're a cat, and then you're an owl, and then you're a shark, and then you're a sea creature or whatever. Or poor baby Gregory's tragic tale was another standout moment from that game, certainly. But I land on Lewis because Lewis's monotonous tale of working in the fishing cannery and just chopping fish's heads off for a while, it resonates with me. Eventually, his mind begins to wander, and he starts creating this more and more elaborate world for himself. And so, on one hand, you're controlling him chopping off the fish heads, and the other, you're kind of guiding him through this fantastical world that he is creating in his head, where he is the king and he is the ruler, and the people love him. And it's such a tragic tale of feeling crushed under the weight of your normal life and wanting to escape into this other thing that I certainly use video games as an element of escape. I don't use it, to completely escape the doldrums of my day, but it is my go-to method of escapism, more or less. And so I think it's a very haunting tale, and it's eerily reminiscent, I think, to anybody who might look to fantastic worlds, be it in video games or movies or books or whatever, as escapism from the reality of our day-to-day lives. And upon reflection, Lewis's tale is the one that scares me the most because, he, of course, tragically ends his tale by sticking his own head into the fish's guillotine and killing himself. And I would be lying if I said I didn't have dark thoughts or didn't think about, who would miss me, what would my life be like if I went down that path. Fortunately, I know I've got friends that help me get through it, but the thoughts have been there, and it's terrifying. On to number 6 for a drastically much more upbeat moment of the year. You have the New Donk City finale from Super Mario Odyssey. It's the finale of Metro Kingdom, Super Mario Odyssey, commonly known as New Donk City. When we enter the Metro Kingdom, the power has been out all across the city, and we have to take out a big bad monster to kind of restore life into this town. And then doing so, the town kind of returns to its usual hustle and bustle, but Mayor Pauline is still missing her band, so you have to go and collect her band, and then you have to go and restore the last little bit of power, and doing all of that triggers this grand concert that Pauline is going to put on to celebrate Mario and the city's rich history. And what follows is, I think, the game's most prolonged 8-bit sequence, and it's just a bright and peppy course across most of the city itself. You're going through kind of building upon building, and it's set up to that catchy Jump Up Superstar song, which I probably heard 50 times waiting in line to play the demo at E3, and it culminates in an homage to Donkey Kong, which started it all, some 30 years ago. And as Mario climbs those all too familiar girders, dodging barrels on his way to save Pauline, it's just a purely joyous moment in a game that absolutely relishes celebrating the history of gaming's #1 mascot. Number 5, from Wolfenstein 2, The New Colossus, confronting B.J. Blazkowicz's father. When Wolfenstein was announced in the current American political climate, I knew full well that kicking Nazi ass was going to be very, very cathartic in 2017. I did not expect that the most cathartic moment of that game, in a game where you can kick Adolf Hitler in the face, would be a much more personal moment for our protagonist, B.J. Blazkowicz. Early on in the game, we are introduced to Rip Blazkowicz, BJ's absolute piece of shit father, who checks off pretty much all of the worst of humanity boxes. He's an abusive husband and father, he's racist, he's anti-Semitic, despite having married a Jewish woman for the father's money, and he forces you to shoot your childhood dog with a shotgun. So after one single scene with this guy, I had more anger toward him than any of the hundreds of nameless Nazis that I was going to face throughout this game. So imagine my delight when I get to confront him following BJ's impromptu return to his Mesquite ranch and in hopes of grabbing his mother's engagement ring for Anya. Rip confirms that he's just continued to be a worse and worse piece of shit since the Nazis took over, and so it took me all of 0 seconds when the game gave me control of BJ to hatchet that son of a bitch's hand right off and then stab him right where his heart would have been if he had one. It was easily the most cathartic story-driven moment in any game I played this year. Number 4, finally fucking beating Callus. So while BJ's dad was the most cathartic moment from a storytelling perspective, finally defeating the Destiny 2 Leviathan raid boss Callus was the most cathartic on a personal gameplay level. Together with my newfound Ride or Die Destiny 2 raid group of Alex and Tony and Cameron and Mina and Connor, we spent over 17 hours over 2 separate days on our first attempt at the raid, before ultimately coming up short against Callus. In that first attempt, if I recall correctly, we only did damage to him once. Fortunately, we reunited a few weeks later. A couple people had already kind of gone off into other groups and managed to get through the raid. But we were able to make it all the way to Callus in just a couple hours. Then we came close to beating him that first night, but still ended up falling short. But when we reconvened a couple days later, we were finally able to put that piece of shit out. And a lot about that victorious night is a blur, admittedly. We still died a whole bunch of it in the lead up to it, but I remember we really came close at one point, and then I think we got screwed over by some glitch where Callus just threw lava on the floor or something and just destroyed us unexpectedly. But when we did finally manage it, we were on the last pillar of, I think, our second damage phase, and Tony was talking about how he needed orbs, and if he got one more orb, he'd hit his ultimate, and when he could launch his super. I right then hit mine, shot my gunslinger 3 shots, got the orbs that Tony needed. Tony did his damage, and I'm pretty sure I blacked out for a couple seconds there, because the next thing I remember, we were all screaming in joy, having finally beat the son of a bitch. So I'm hoping the 6 of us can get back together at some point in time for the new Destiny raid lairs, but timing's been bad for Curse of Osiris coming out with everybody with around the holidays, and some people were in finals and whatnot. So maybe once the next expansion hits, we'll be able to get back together and try both of them out in 2018, because finally achieving that victory with that group of people who I'd been in the trenches with, was easily my favorite moment from playing a game this year. Despite how much I railed and ranted about Destiny 2's raid prior to that victory, from a purely gameplay moment, finally overcoming that thing, that beating that challenge that was probably 30 hours in the making at that point, was bliss. Moment number 3. David Soliani crying as Miyamoto praised his work on Mario plus Rabbids. So my top 3 moments aren't going to come from any single game, but rather they're just my favorite moments from gaming this year. While it's easy to get hung up on nebulous companies, giving us loot boxes and microtransactions that we can just hate and espouse and just destroy, it's always worth remembering that there are people behind these games. And sometimes those people hijack the stage and undo all of the work that Jeff Keighley's been trying to do to make the Game Awards seem like a legitimate thing, because they go on a stupid drunken tirade and send us back 10 years because fuck you, Joseph Ferris. I'm still pissed about how disrespectful you were at the Game Awards. But other times, the cameras catch a moment of pure pride and joy, which was the case during Ubisoft's E3 press conference. Putting an emphasis on their people for pretty much the entirety of their conference, Ubisoft celebrated many of their developers at E3 and kicked off their show with an extended look at the officially announced Mario plus Rabbids Kingdom Battle. It was a crossover between Nintendo's Mario and Ubisoft's Rabbids, and Shigeru Miyamoto himself came on stage to talk about the game, and the cameras caught Ubisoft Milan's creative director David Soliani holding back his tears of joy and pride upon hearing this icon of the industry praise the work that he and his team were doing. And I'm a snarky bastard, and that very much often comes out in its most pure forms during E3's press conferences, when I can just kind of be a cynical piece of crap. And even that moment hit me. Seeing him just proud was a wonderful moment. And I love that he became a meme in the best possible way as a result of it. Number 2, attending my first E3. My first distinct memory of E3 is when this kid, Ari Lawrence, came back from summer break into our senior year of high school, and he had attended E3. And we weren't the best of friends, but we did theater and choir together, and he knew that I was a fellow gamer, and so he gave me a demo disc of .hack Infection. Ended up getting me into that series as well. So he had attended the 2002 E3, and suddenly, hearing him talk about it, it became my video game mecca. I didn't think I'd ever actually make the trip, though, until maybe a few years ago when I started just going to video game things and started trying to get into the industry. Back when I was an aspiring theater manager for live theater, not movie theaters, gaming was a hobby that I was very in tune with. And, I would try and catch the recaps of press conferences back when they were just write-ups. And then when they started streaming them online, I started trying to catch them as they happened. And I almost made the trip in 2016 last year, but it came too close on the heels of other travel like Kinda Funny Live, and I just couldn't take that much time back-to-back off work. But this year I planned for it. I committed to the idea of going to E3 pretty early on this year, going so far to even eat the cost. I was originally going to go to RTX Sydney. I had flights and hotels booked for it, but the time off that I was going to need to take for that was just going to be too much to allow me to do something like E3 and then other travel opportunities throughout the rest of the year. So I ended up eating the cost of the plane tickets. I was able to get the money for the hotel back, but the flight to and from Sydney, I was just out. It was a little less special when ESA announced that it was going to be open to the public and there were going to be 15,000 public seats, but I was still able to attend as media, thanks in huge part to my friends over at IGN, as well as at the Coalition. Both of them kind of independently of one another hit me up with the same amount of, about the same time, saying, "Hey, you want to go to E3? We've got like a spare thing." And so I am incredibly grateful to both of them. without better media contacts, it was very much like attending the show as a person of the public for me. But it was still something that I've wanted to do for 15 years, something I was able to cross off my bucket list. I don't think I'll be dedicating the vacation time to returning in 2018, unless I get hired in the industry between now and then. But I was very glad to have kind of made this 15-year dream become a reality. Number 1, Irrational Passions Extra Life. In a nice little bit of symmetry here, I have the list starting with friends and ending with friends as well. As I touched on in one of my recent videos, I got to do a lot of incredible travel this year, like the aforementioned E3 trip. But my trip to join a small group of friends for a weekend of gaming for a good cause tops that list. Nearly a year in the making, I first talked to Alex at PSX last year about wanting to come out and join them for Extra Life this year, and he graciously welcomed me with open arms. As somebody who's been doing Extra Life the last couple of years as a solo affair, I wanted to try and just be more involved and be with other people instead of just doing it myself again. Back at PAX East earlier this year, a lot of us had this wonderful little pre-PAX dinner, and Greg Miller ended up joining us. He was kind enough to show up and join us that day, and we planted 2 seeds that day. One, that Greg was going to fly out for IP Extra Life, and 2, that I would most likely be cutting my hair off on the stream. They'd shaved Danny Warris's head last year, and so I was like, yep, I'm super ready to let mine go, so we chopped it all off. In the months leading up to the event, we started finalizing plans on who would or would not be able to attend. Alex put together a wonderful Google Doc where we kind of put all of our ideas forth of things we wanted to do. It's where my idea for hot pepper hot takes was born, to my very painful regret, though I do stand by everything I said about Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. We even considered renting out a hotel conference room or ballroom or something like that for that weekend as an alternative to going and crashing and potentially ruining Alex's house, but ultimately we stuck it out at his place. As many of us started arriving for the weekend stream, we reconnected with old friends and met many new ones. I didn't know maybe a third of the people that were there that weekend prior to attending. A group of us ended up seeing Thor Ragnarok all together, which was a ton of fun. Friday, a bunch of us went grocery shopping because Geneviève Saint-Onge-Melaire, Greg's lovely, wonderful wife, graciously offered to kind of cook for the 20 plus of us during the event, so we were fed and didn't have to, one less thing we had to worry about. So a bunch of us went, and I became very good friends with George Cruz as we learned backwards and forwards the produce section of Alex's local grocer. By Friday night, nearly all of us who were attending had collected together, and were basically just kicking off a 2-day house party. Irrational Passions hosted their podcast, and attendees tagged in and out as guests all night. And I was actually a bit sad to realize recently that this was my one and only appearance on Irrational Passions this year. We also ended up putting together our tentative game plan for the event, figuring out the order and what segments we were going to do. Eventually, we got a little bit of sleep for the long day ahead, and I'll be honest, the 24-hour stream itself feels like a blur and a half. I lost a little over a pound when we shaved my head. That's about what my hair weighed. But I'm sure I gained it back in Jen's amazing feasts that she prepared for everybody. I really just had a great time hanging around and playing video games with friends. Something I haven't had the experience of really since high school, when I would play GoldenEye or No Mercy with my little group of friends. I didn't take enough time then to really breathe it all in and appreciate what was happening, but we put on an amazing and incredibly fun event, and before it even wrapped, I was already thinking of ideas of what we could do in 2018 if I am so lucky to return again. After we wrapped, some of the folks left and called it a weekend, so we said our heartfelt goodbyes. The rest of us crashed for a few hours to recover, and then we went out to a celebratory dinner over at the Cheesecake Factory. The next day, Alex and new friend Jazz drove me to the airport, as well as Roger Picorni off to the bus station, and we just belted out 4 or 5 songs from Hamilton on that drive, and it was incredible. Friends and strangers from around the country, and even Ali Mushka from Canada, came together for a magical weekend, and we left a family. It was a hell of a moment. So those are my 10 favorite gaming moments of 2017. Let me know what yours are in the comments below. As always, I've been your host, Trevor Starkey from TrevorTrove.com. You can follow me at SnarkyStarkey on Twitter. And until next time, from here at the Trove, treasure your friends.